I stood alone by my mom's hospital bed as she passed. Other rooms echoed with supportive families. Mine stayed silent. No dad, no siblings, no calls, not even a fake excuse. As the doctor marked the time, a nurse handed me her final letter. Inside were names, a key, and secrets that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my family. In that sterile room, with beeping machines falling silent, I became the sole witness to the end of a life filled with silent suffering and buried truths. The fluorescent lights of the hospital room cast harsh shadows across my mother's gaunt face. For 3 weeks, I had watched her battle aggressive pancreatic cancer, a fight her body was never going to win. And for 3 weeks, I had been the only family member sitting beside her bed. Mr. Davidson, the night nurse, Elaine, spoke softly as she entered the room. "Can I get you anything? Some coffee, maybe?" "I'm fine, thanks," I replied, my voice hoarse from exhaustion. At 34, I never expected to face my mother's mortality alone. I checked my phone again. Still nothing. No messages from my father Thomas, nothing from my brother Jack or my sister Audrey. Just silence, as there had been since Mom's diagnosis. "She's hanging in there," Elaine said, checking my mother's vitals. "She's fighting for something." Mr. Davidson, the night nurse, Elaine, spoke softly as she entered the room. "Can I get you anything? Some coffee, maybe?" In the neighboring rooms, I could hear the murmurs of families gathered together, supporting their loved ones through their final journey. Laughter occasionally filtered through the walls, reminding me that even in the face of death, there could be moments of connection and love. My phone lit up, and for a moment, hope flared in my chest. But it was just a news alert. Not my father or siblings, finally answering my desperate calls and messages. "King," my mother's voice was barely audible as her eyes fluttered open. She hadn't spoken in almost 12 hours, and I immediately reached for her hand. "I'm here, Mom," I said, leaning close. "The others?" she asked, her eyes searching the room. I couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth, that no one else was coming. "They send their love," I lied, hating myself for it, but unable to let her final moments be tainted with the knowledge that she had been abandoned. A small, knowing smile crossed her face. "Always protecting me," she whispered. "Listen to me, King. The truth is in the letter. You deserved better." They all did. "What letter?" I asked. But her eyes had closed again, her breathing becoming more labored. I called for the nurse, and suddenly the room was filled with medical staff. I was pushed back against the wall as they worked, checking monitors and adjusting equipment. But I could see in their faces that this was the end. Time of death, 9:42 p.m., Dr. Weston announced quietly after several minutes of activity. The room emptied as quickly as it had filled, leaving me alone with my mother's body. The silence was deafening after the rush of activity. "Mr. Davidson," Elaine appeared at my side, holding an envelope. "Your mother asked me to give you this when it was time. She was very specific about it." I took the sealed envelope, my name written across it in my mother's handwriting. It felt heavy with significance. "Thank you for being here for her," Elaine said, squeezing my shoulder. "She told me how much it meant to her, having you by her side." I nodded, unable to speak through the knot in my throat. After signing the necessary paperwork and saying a final goodbye to my mother, I made my way to the hospital parking lot. The night air was cool against my face. As I sat in my car, the envelope clutched in my hand. As I was about to open it, my phone rang. The name on the screen made my heart skip. Dad. For a moment, I thought perhaps he had somehow sensed that Mom had passed, that he was calling to offer condolences or express regret for not being there. "Dad," I answered, my voice breaking slightly. "King." My father's voice was brisk, businesslike. "Did she have any financial documents with her? Insurance forms? Bank statements? I need you to bring everything to the house immediately. No condolences. No questions about Mom's final moments. Just business." "She just died, Dad," I said, disbelief coloring my words. "I'm aware of the situation," he replied coldly. "But there are practical matters that need attending to. Bring everything to the house. Tonight." Before I could respond, he hung up. I stared at my phone in shock, then at the envelope in my hand. What was so important that my mother had made sure it would be delivered immediately after her death? With trembling fingers, I tore open the seal. The hospital parking lot lights cast a yellow glow over the pages as I began to read. My mother's handwriting, once so elegant and precise, now showed the tremor of her illness. My dearest King, if you're reading this, I've finally found the courage to tell the truth, though too late for me to face the consequences. I've lived with shame and regret for 30 years, and I cannot leave this world without setting things right. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you thought you knew about our family. Your father, Thomas, wasn't always the man you know. Before he married me, he was married to a woman named Sarah Walker. They had 2 children together, Madison and Troy Walker. Yes, you have a half-sister and half-brother you've never met. Children your father abandoned when he met me. I stopped reading, my mind reeling. Half-siblings? My father had another family before us? I forced myself to continue. Thomas divorced Sarah when he discovered my family had more wealth and influence. He abandoned his first family completely, cutting them out of his life as if they never existed. And I, God forgive me, I helped him do it. I was young and foolishly in love, willing to overlook his cruelty because I believed he truly loved me. But worse than the abandonment was the theft. Thomas systematically drained Sarah's family trust that should have supported her children, using legal loopholes and forged documents. I discovered this too late, after we were married and I was pregnant with you. By then, Thomas had control of my family's assets too. When I confronted him, he threatened to take you from me if I ever spoke a word about Sarah or her children. I was trapped, King. Trapped by my own poor choices and by fear. The enclosed key opens storage unit #237 at Secure Lock Storage on Westbrook Avenue. Inside is everything I've collected over the years, evidence of your father's fraud, copies of the documents he used to steal from both families, and the true financial records. I've been sending small amounts to Sarah and her children when I could, without Thomas knowing. It was never enough to make up for what was taken from them, but it was all I could do. Find Sarah, Madison, and Troy. They deserve justice. And you deserve to know the truth about your father. I've written their contact information on the back of this letter. I'm so sorry, King. Sorry for my weakness. Sorry for the lies. And sorry that I won't be there to help you through the storm that's coming. You were always the best of me, the only truly good thing in my life. With all my love, Mom. I flipped the page over and found 3 names with addresses and phone numbers. Sarah Walker, Madison Walker, Troy Walker, my father's first wife, and their children. My half-siblings. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fold the letter. The weight of my mother's confession crushed down on me, making it difficult to breathe. 30 years of lies. A whole other family I never knew existed. I thought about my childhood, trying to recall any clues, any hints that might have revealed this secret. There was that room in our house that always stayed locked. The one Dad claimed was just for storage. The way my father would sometimes stare at old photographs with a strange expression before quickly putting them away when anyone entered the room. The hushed arguments between my parents that would cease the moment one of us children appeared. It all made a terrible kind of sense now. I decided to call my siblings. They needed to know. Despite our strained relationship, they deserved to hear this from family, not from the eventual legal fallout that was sure to come. Audrey answered on the 4th ring. What do you want, King? It's late. Mom's gone, I said simply. She passed about an hour ago. A pause. Oh, well, we knew it was coming. Are you handling the arrangements? No tears, no emotion, just practicality. Audrey, there's something else, something important. Dad wasn't always Dad. He had another family before us. A wife named Sarah and 2 kids. What are you talking about? Her voice had taken on an edge. Mom left me a letter. Dad abandoned his first family to marry Mom for her money. He stole from them, Audrey. He's been stealing for decades. You know what? I don't have time for this right now. Mom's death doesn't give you the right to create drama about Dad. This isn't drama. It's the truth. There's evidence. Save it, King. Just deal with Mom's funeral or whatever needs doing. I'll talk to you later. The line went dead. Jack was even less receptive, hanging up almost immediately after I mentioned the letter. Frustrated and hurt by their reactions, I decided to drive to my childhood home. Maybe if I showed them the letter in person, they would take it more seriously. And maybe, just maybe, I could confront my father face to face. As I pulled onto the familiar street where I grew up, I noticed several cars parked in the driveway and along the curb. Lights blazed from every window of the house, and as I got closer, I could hear music and laughter. A party? On the night my mother died? I parked across the street, disbelief giving way to a burning anger. When I reached the front door, I didn't bother knocking. Using my old key, I walked straight in. The scene that greeted me stopped me cold. My father, Thomas, stood in the center of the living room with a champagne glass raised high. My brother and sister flanked him, also holding glasses. Around them stood several men and women in business attire, all smiling and celebratory. To new beginnings and successful ventures, my father was toasting as I entered. The room fell silent as everyone turned to stare at me. King, my father lowered his glass, his expression shifting from surprise to annoyance. What are you doing here? Mom died tonight, I said, loudly enough for everyone to hear. And you're having a party? A few of the business people had the decency to look uncomfortable, but my father merely shrugged. Life goes on, he said simply. We're celebrating the Riverside property closing. It's been a long time coming. The Riverside property. My mother's family's land. The property that should have been held in trust for all of us. How appropriate, I said bitterly, that you'd sell off Mom's family property the day she dies. My father's eyes narrowed. I think you should leave, King. You're clearly emotional and not thinking clearly. Actually, I pulled out my mother's letter. I'm thinking more clearly than I ever have before. Who's Sarah Walker, Dad? At the mention of that name, my father's face drained of color. The glass in my father's hand trembled slightly before he regained his composure. Around us, the party guests shifted uncomfortably, sensing the sudden tension in the room. Everyone, please excuse us for a moment, my father said smoothly. Family matter. Help yourselves to more champagne in the dining room. The guests filed out quickly, leaving only my father, Jack, Audrey, and me in the living room. As soon as the last guest was out of earshot, my father's demeanor changed completely. Where did you hear that name? He demanded, his voice low and dangerous. From Mom, I replied, holding up the letter. She left this for me. Told me everything about your first wife and the children you abandoned. Jack stepped forward, placing himself between me and our father. King, you need to calm down. Mom was on heavy medications. She wasn't in her right mind. So you knew? I asked, looking at my brother in disbelief. You knew about Sarah and her kids? Jack at least had the grace to look ashamed. I found out a few years ago. It's complicated. It's not complicated at all, I countered. Dad abandoned his first family, stole their money, and married Mom for her family's wealth. He's been stealing from both families for decades. That's absurd, my father snapped. Patricia was delusional at the end, making up stories. Then explain the storage unit, I challenged. The one with 30 years of evidence, she collected. The documents proving you forged signatures, falsified records, and embezzled money from both families. My father's face hardened. There is no evidence because there was no crime. I divorced Sarah legally and fairly. Whatever fantasy your mother concocted, stop it! I shouted, surprising even myself with the force of my anger. Stop lying! Mom is dead. She died alone except for me because none of you could be bothered to be there. And now I find you celebrating? Selling off her family property the same day she died? Audrey stepped forward, her eyes cold. The property sale has been in the works for months. The timing is just coincidence. Is it? I looked around the familiar living room, seeing it with new eyes. The expensive art on the walls, the custom furniture, the trappings of wealth that had always surrounded us. How much of this was bought with stolen money? How much of our comfort came at the expense of Sarah's family? Enough. My father slammed his glass down on the coffee table. I've indulged this nonsense long enough. Your mother was a bitter woman who couldn't accept that I never loved her the way she wanted. Yes, I married her partly for her family connections. That's not a crime, it's business. And yes, the property was always going to be liquidated. That was the plan from the beginning. His casual cruelty stunned me into momentary silence. "You never loved her?" I finally managed. "She was convenient," my father said dismissively. "Her family had money and connections, mine didn't. We had an arrangement." "And what about us?" I asked, looking between my siblings. "Was having children just part of the arrangement too?" "Children secure inheritance claims," my father said matter-of-factly. "But you were always a disappointment, King. Too soft, too much like your mother. Always questioning, never accepting the natural order of things." Jack cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Dad, maybe we should—" "And what about us?" I asked, looking between my siblings. "Was having children just part of the arrangement too?" My father's face hardened. "There is no evidence because there was no crime. I divorced Sarah legally and fairly. Whatever fantasy your mother concocted." I turned to my siblings, searching their faces for any sign of shock or disagreement. But there was none. "No," my father cut him off. "He wants the truth? Fine. The truth is that business and family are the same thing. Assets to be managed. Some investments pay off, others don't. Your mother didn't, and neither have you." "Not all of it," Audrey admitted, "but enough. Dad told us years ago, swore us to secrecy. Said it would destroy the family if it ever got out." Audrey looked away. "It was tied up in family trusts. Dad managed it. Managed it right into his own pocket," I said bitterly. "And the Riverside property? That was part of Mom's family legacy. It wasn't Dad's to sell. Everything is in my name now," my father said with a shrug. "Perfectly legal. Your grandparents were trusting fools who didn't read the fine print. And your mother was too weak to stop me. The property sale closed this afternoon. The money has already been transferred. There's nothing you can do." I felt sick. The casual way he admitted to decades of manipulation and theft was chilling. "I'll go to the police," I threatened. "I'll show them Mom's evidence." My father laughed, an ugly sound devoid of humor. "With what proof? Ramblings from a dying woman? Paperwork that will mysteriously disappear before any authority sees it? Against a man with my connections in this town?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Let me make something very clear. King, if you pursue this, you'll lose. Not just the case, but everything. Your job, your reputation, what little relationship you have left with your siblings. I'll make sure of it." I looked at Jack and Audrey, hoping to see some flicker of support or doubt. But they stood firmly beside our father, their expressions closed and defensive. "Mom said I deserved better," I told them. "She said you all did. I guess she was only half right." I turned to leave, the letter clutched tightly in my hand. "King," my father called after me, "don't throw away your future on this. Walk away now, and you can still be part of this family." I paused at the doorway, not turning around. "What family?" I asked quietly. "All I see are accomplices." The sound of the door closing behind me was like the period at the end of a chapter. As I walked to my car, the cool night air did nothing to calm the storm of emotions raging inside me. When I climbed inside, I sat there for several minutes, trying to process everything that had happened. My mother was gone. My father was a monster. My siblings were complicit. And somewhere out there was another family, victims of my father's greed, who had suffered for 30 years while we lived in ignorant luxury. As I started the engine, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "I knew your mother. I've been waiting 30 years for Thomas's house of lies to crumble. Meet me tomorrow at Jerry's Diner, 10 a.m. Come alone." I stared at the message, a chill running down my spine. Who could it be? Sarah? One of my half-siblings? Someone else entirely? Whoever it was, they represented my only chance to learn the full truth, and possibly my only allies in bringing my father to justice. "I knew your mother. I've been waiting 30 years for Thomas's house of lies to crumble. Meet me tomorrow at Jerry's Diner, 10 a.m. Come alone." As I started the engine, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Jerry's Diner sat on the outskirts of town, a faded relic of the 1950 seconds, with chrome fixtures and red vinyl booths. I arrived 20 minutes early, choosing a seat near the back with a clear view of the entrance. Every time the bell over the door jingled, I tensed, wondering if this would be the mysterious texter. You look so much like him, she said softly, studying my face. The way he was when I first met him. Before the ambition took over, Sarah Walker? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She nodded, sliding into the booth across from me. And your king, Patricia's boy. A waitress approached with coffee, and we both ordered, going through the motions of normalcy while the weight of 3 decades of secrets hung between us. I wasn't sure you'd come, Sarah said once we were alone again. I've imagined this meeting so many times over the years. Never thought it would happen after Patricia's death, though. I'm sorry for your loss. Thank you, I said automatically. I'm still processing everything. The letter, the revelations about my father, about you and your children, our family. Sarah's eyes softened. Patricia reached out to me about 6 months ago. Told me she was sick, that she didn't have much time left. She wanted to make things right before she died. Were you in contact before that? Sarah nodded, sporadically, over the years. She would send money when she could, letters occasionally. Always in secret. She was terrified of Thomas finding out. You said I look like my father, I said hesitantly. Do you hate me for that? No, she answered firmly. You're not responsible for your father's sins. And Patricia spoke very highly of you in her letters. Said you were nothing like him inside, where it counts. The diner door opened again, and 2 people entered, a man and a woman, both in their early 40s. They spotted Sarah and made their way over to our booth. Madison, Troy, Sarah said with a gentle smile. This is King. My half-siblings slid into the booth beside their mother. Up close, the family resemblance was undeniable. Troy had the same jawline as Jack, and Madison had our father's eyes, though hers held a warmth I'd never seen in his. This is surreal, Madison said, studying me. We've known about you our whole lives, but we never thought we'd actually meet. I just found out about you yesterday, I admitted. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. Troy's expression was more guarded. Can't blame you for the shock. Finding out your father is a world-class con man and thief isn't exactly an everyday occurrence. Troy, Sarah cautioned. It's okay, I said. He's right. My father is exactly that, and I want to know everything. I just found out about you yesterday, I admitted. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it all. He was so smooth about it, Sarah explained. Everything seemed reasonable at the time. Consolidating accounts for better returns, investing in promising ventures. By the time I realized money was missing, he had control of almost everything. And then he met Mom, I said. Sarah nodded. Patricia's family had even more money than mine. Old money, established connections. Thomas saw a better opportunity and took it. Filed for divorce, fabricated reasons, made it look like I was unstable and unfit. He got everything, including full control of my family's trust. Claimed it was for investment management until the children were of age. But you never saw that money again, I guessed. Not a penny, Troy confirmed bitterly. He cut us off completely. Changed his phone number. Moved across town. Started his new perfect family with your mother. While we struggled, Madison added. Mom had to work 3 jobs. We lived in a tiny apartment. I couldn't go to college because we couldn't afford it, even though my trust fund should have paid for it easily. I felt sick with shame and guilt. While they had struggled, I had enjoyed private schools, summer camps, a car on my 16th birthday. Your mother tried to help, Sarah said, as if reading my thoughts. She would send cash when she could, gift cards during the holidays. Always anonymously at first, until I figured out it was her. How did you know? I asked. Sarah smiled sadly. She sent a birthday card to Madison once, and forgot to disguise her handwriting. After that, we occasionally spoke on the phone when Thomas was away on business trips. She was trapped, King. Trapped by her own choices and by Thomas's threats. What kind of threats? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. He told her he would take you away from her if she ever revealed the truth, Sarah confirmed. That he would make sure she never saw you again. And he could have done it too. By then, he had judges and politicians in his pocket. What kind of threats? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Local businessman finalizes sale of historic riverside property. Troy pulled out his phone, scrolling through until he found what he was looking for. He pushed it across the table to me. It was a news article from the local paper, dated just 2 days ago. The article detailed the sale of a 3-acre waterfront property, once the site of a 19th-century mill, now prime real estate for luxury development. The sale price was listed at just over $3 million. How do you know it was forged? I asked. Sarah reached into her purse and pulled out a yellowed document. Because I have the original deed right here. It was never meant to be sold. It was supposed to be held in trust for 3 generations. I examined the document, noting the specific legal language prohibiting sale of the property without unanimous consent from all living descendants of the original owner. This is what your mother was trying to tell you about, Madison explained. Thomas has been systematically liquidating assets from both families for years. The Riverside property was the biggest one yet. With that money, he could easily disappear overseas, somewhere without extradition. Is that what you think he's planning? I asked, alarm growing within me. We know it, Troy said grimly. Patricia found documents, travel arrangements, offshore accounts, property inquiries in countries with no extradition treaties with the U.S. That's why she finally decided to act, Sarah added. She knew she was dying, knew she had nothing left to lose, and she couldn't bear the thought of Thomas getting away with everything. I thought about the storage unit, the key my mother had left me. She kept evidence, I told them. Decades worth, according to her letter. The key she left me opens a storage unit where she kept it all. Madison and Troy exchanged looks. We need to get to that evidence, Madison said urgently, before Thomas realizes it exists and destroys it. He threatened me last night, I admitted. Said if I pursued this, he'd make sure I lost everything. That sounds like Thomas, Sarah said grimly. He's always been skilled at threats and intimidation. But there are 4 of us now, Troy pointed out. And we have the element of surprise. He doesn't know that you've met us, doesn't know about the evidence Patricia collected. I looked at these people, my blood relatives, who had suffered so much because of my father, who had every reason to hate me and my siblings for the life we had lived at their expense. Yet here they were, including me in their plans, treating me as an ally rather than an enemy. Why are you willing to trust me? I asked them honestly. How do you know I won't go straight to my father with everything you've told me? Madison reached across the table and took my hand, surprising me. Because you're Patricia's son, she said simply, and because you were there with her at the end, when your father and siblings weren't. That tells us everything we need to know about your character. Sarah nodded in agreement. Besides, Patricia sent us photos of you over the years, told us about your life. We've known you from a distance for a long time, King. In a way, we've been watching over you, just as Patricia watched over us when she could. The realization that these strangers knew more about me than I knew about them was disorienting. But also, oddly comforting. In the midst of losing my mother and discovering my father's true nature, I had somehow gained a new family. We should go to the storage unit now, I decided. See what evidence Mom collected, then decide our next steps. As we were leaving the diner, my phone rang. It was Jack. Hey, he said when I answered, his voice unusually subdued. We need to talk about what happened last night. Can you meet me at the house later? I hesitated, looking at Sarah, Madison, and Troy waiting for me. Not today, I said finally. I'm dealing with Mom's affairs. King, listen. Jack lowered his voice. Dad's furious. He's talking about cutting you out completely, changing his will. You need to come smooth things over before he does something we'll all regret. The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. I think we're well past the point of regrets, Jack. Tell Dad not to worry about changing his will. I don't want anything from him. I hung up before he could respond. When I looked up, Sarah was watching me with a mixture of sadness and understanding. It's not easy, standing up to family, she said gently. Even when they're in the wrong. You 3 are my family too, I replied, surprising myself with how right the words felt. And it's time I started acting like it. Secure Lock Storage was a sprawling facility on the industrial side of town. Row after row of identical metal doors lined the concrete paths between buildings. Unit 237 was in the back corner of the complex, away from the main office and security cameras. The key slid into the lock smoothly, turning with a satisfying click. The door rolled upward, revealing a space about 10 feet by 15 feet, filled with neatly labeled file boxes. "My God," Madison whispered, stepping inside. She really did document everything. The storage unit contained at least 30 boxes, each labeled by year, starting from 3 decades ago. On a small table in the center sat a leather-bound journal with "Read First" written on the cover. I picked up the journal, feeling my mother's presence in this room she had created in secret. Opening it, I found a table of contents, meticulously organized by type of fraud, year, and affected family members. "She was a paralegal before she married Thomas," Sarah explained, seeing my surprise. "She knew how to document and organize evidence." "She categorized everything," I said, scanning the pages. "Forged signatures, falsified tax returns, fraudulent property transfers, embezzlement from trust accounts." Troy had already opened one of the boxes and was examining its contents. "These are copies of bank statements, showing money moving from our family's accounts to offshore holdings," he said, his voice tight with anger. "Transactions that never should have been allowed without multiple signatures." Madison found another box containing correspondence. "Look at this," she said, holding up a letter. "It's from Mom's attorney to the trustee of our family's estate, raising concerns about unusual withdrawals. And here's the response, supposedly from the trustee, dismissing the concerns. But the signatures don't match previous letters. Because Thomas forged it," Sarah confirmed, examining the documents. "The real trustee, my Uncle Harold, had died just a month before. Thomas intercepted the mail and responded himself before a new trustee could be appointed." I found a box labeled "Unsent Letters" and opened it with trembling hands. Inside were dozens of envelopes addressed to Madison and Troy Walker, spanning years, all in my mother's handwriting. I selected one at random and opened it. "Dear Madison, today was your high school graduation, according to my calculations. I saw an announcement in the paper and felt such pride, though I have no right to it. I wonder if you wore the blue necklace I sent anonymously last month. I hope so. I like to think you had something from me on this important day. I wish I could have been there to see you walk across the stage. King is still in middle school, but someday he'll graduate too, and I'll think of you then, as I always do on milestones. I'm so sorry for the role I played in your life's difficulties. If I could go back and make different choices, I would. Please know that not a day passes that I don't think of you and Troy, and hope that someday I'll find the courage to make things right. With love always, Patricia." I handed the letter to Madison, who read it with tears streaming down her face. "I wore that necklace," she whispered, "a simple blue stone on a silver chain. I never knew where it came from. I just found it in the mail with a note saying, 'Congratulations.' I still have it." While they continued examining the letters, I turned to a box labeled "Financial Crimes Last 5 Years." Inside, I found detailed documentation of recent fraudulent activities, including the Riverside property sale. "Look at this," I called to the others. "Mom kept records of Dad's recent plans too. Here's documentation showing he's been setting up accounts in the Cayman Islands, and property inquiries in countries without extradition treaties." Troy joined me, examining the documents. "These are dated just 3 weeks ago. Your mother must have been collecting evidence right up until she went into the hospital. She knew he was planning to take the money from the Riverside sale and disappear," I realized. "That's why she was so determined to get this information to us before she died." Sarah had found another box containing legal documents. "Patricia consulted with an attorney," she said, holding up a confidential legal memo. "According to this, there's enough evidence here for criminal charges of fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, and possibly even RICO violations." "RICO?" I asked. "Racketeering," Troy explained. "It's a serious federal charge used against organized criminal enterprises. If these charges stick, Thomas could face decades in prison, not just financial penalties. The memo says the statute of limitations hasn't expired on most of these crimes," Sarah continued, reading further. "Because Thomas continued the same pattern of fraud over decades, It's considered an ongoing criminal enterprise. Madison had been sorting through another box and suddenly gasped. There's a complete record of all the money Thomas stole from both families, she said. According to this, the total amount exceeds $12 million over 30 years. The enormity of my father's crimes was staggering. This wasn't just about the Riverside property or a few trust accounts. This was a decades-long criminal operation, meticulously planned and executed, with my mother as an unwilling witness who documented everything. We need to take this to the authorities, I said finally. All of it. It won't be that simple, Troy cautioned. Thomas has connections. Remember? Local police. Even the district attorney's office. He's been donating to political campaigns for years. Then we go federal, Madison suggested. FBI handles financial crimes across state lines, which some of these appear to be. Sarah had been quiet, examining more of the documents. Before we go to any authorities, she said carefully, we need to consult with an attorney of our own. Someone with no connection to Thomas. These documents implicate Patricia too, to some extent. She knew about the fraud and didn't report it. She was being threatened, I defended. She was protecting me. I know that, Sarah assured me. And I believe any reasonable person would understand her position. But legally, we need to be careful how we present this evidence to ensure it's used against Thomas, not to posthumously harm Patricia. I know someone, Troy said, a law school friend, who specializes in white-collar crime. She works in the city now, far from Thomas's sphere of influence. I can call her. As Troy stepped outside to make the call, I continued looking through the boxes. In one labeled personal, I found family photographs I'd never seen before. Pictures of Sarah with Thomas, looking young and in love. Photos of baby Madison and toddler Troy. And most surprisingly, photos of my mother with Sarah's children when they were young. She used to visit sometimes when Thomas was away on business, Sarah explained, seeing my confusion. In the early years, before he became more controlling, she would bring toys and clothes for the kids, try to make amends in her own way. Did you hate her? I asked honestly. For being with the man who abandoned you? Sarah sighed deeply. At first, yes. I was devastated and angry. But over time, as I learned more about Thomas's manipulations and the way he controlled her, that anger turned to pity, and eventually to a strange sort of kinship. We were both victims of the same man, just in different ways. Madison rejoined us, having found yet more evidence. There are records here of Thomas planning to liquidate more assets next week, she said urgently. Properties that rightfully belong to both our families. If we don't act quickly, he'll complete the sales and transfer the money offshore before we can stop him. Troy returned from his phone call, his expression serious. My contact can see us tomorrow morning. She says to bring copies of the key documents. But to secure the originals, somewhere safe. We could be too late by then, Madison argued. The property sales, we can get an emergency injunction, Troy explained. If we can convince a judge there's evidence of fraud, we can freeze the assets temporarily while the investigation proceeds. But we need to do this right, or Thomas will slip through the loopholes like he always has. I was only half listening to their legal discussion. My attention had been caught by a final box, smaller than the others, tucked in the back corner of the unit. It had my name on it, nothing else. Inside was a single envelope and a small jewelry box. The envelope contained a handwritten note from my mother. My dearest King, if you're reading this, you've discovered the truth and made the difficult choice to pursue justice. I'm so proud of you for your courage. In this box is my grandmother's pocket watch, a family heirloom that Thomas never knew about. I kept it hidden all these years, waiting for the right time to pass it on. It belongs to you now. Whatever happens with Thomas, remember that you are not defined by his actions or his blood. You are your own man, with your own moral compass. Trust it, as I have always trusted you. All my love, Mom. The pocket watch was gold, intricately engraved and still ticking. I held it in my palm, feeling its weight and history, a tangible connection to my mother and her family legacy. We should make copies of the most crucial documents tonight, I said finally, rejoining the conversation. and then figure out our next move. As we carefully selected the most damning evidence to duplicate, I couldn't help wondering what my father was doing at that moment. Was he celebrating his successful property sale, unaware that his house of cards was about to collapse? Was he already making preparations to flee the country? And what about Jack and Audrey? They had aligned themselves with our father. But did they truly understand the extent of his crimes? Did they know they were complicit in the suffering of our half-siblings? One thing was certain. By this time tomorrow, nothing would be the same for any of us. The truth was finally going to come to light, and the reckoning that had been 30 years in the making was about to begin. The meeting with Troy's attorney friend, Cassandra Phillips, confirmed what we already suspected. We had enough evidence for both criminal charges and civil lawsuits against my father. She immediately filed for an emergency injunction to freeze all assets connected to Thomas Davidson, including the proceeds from the Riverside property sale. By noon, a sympathetic judge had granted the request. Thomas won't be able to access those funds or complete any pending property transfers until this is resolved, Cassandra explained. I've also contacted the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. They're sending agents to meet with us this afternoon. How long before my father finds out about the freeze? I asked. And what about Jack and Audrey? They had aligned themselves with our father. But did they truly understand the extent of his crimes? Did they know they were complicit in the suffering of our half-siblings? Then we should confront him directly, I decided, before he has time to destroy evidence or flee. Is that wise? Sarah asked, concern evident in her voice. Thomas can be dangerous when cornered. King's right. Madison supported me. We need to face him together, as a family. Show him that his victims have united against him. Troy nodded in agreement. Besides, there might be physical evidence at the house that wasn't included in Patricia's storage unit. Family documents, original deeds, computer files. We shouldn't give him the chance to destroy anything. With our plan decided, we drove to my childhood home in 2 cars. As we pulled into the driveway, I noticed my father's Mercedes was there, along with Jack's SUV and Audrey's sedan. Perfect. The whole family would be present for this confrontation. I led the way to the front door, using my key one last time. The others followed close behind, Sarah hanging back slightly. 30 years of ingrained fear visible in her hesitant steps. We found my father, Jack, and Audrey in the study. Papers were scattered across the desk, and my father was on the phone, his voice raised in anger. I don't care what the order says. Those are my accounts. You can't just. He stopped mid-sentence as he saw us enter, his eyes widening in shock as he recognized Sarah. I'll call you back, he said into the phone before slowly hanging up. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Jack and Audrey stared at Sarah and her children, clearly recognizing them despite having never met. Well, my father finally said, his voice eerily calm. This is an unexpected family reunion. It's over, Dad, I said firmly. We know everything. About Sarah and her children. About the stolen money. About all of it. Mom kept records. 30 years of evidence documenting your crimes. My father's eyes flicked to Sarah. You've been filling my son's head with lies, I see. No lies, Sarah replied, her voice stronger than I expected. Just the truth. Patricia documented all these years. Every forged document. Every stolen dollar. Every manipulated account. Patricia! My father scoffed. Always the martyr. Playing both sides, while claiming to be a victim. She was a victim. Madison stepped forward, anger flashing in her eyes. Just like my mother, just like all of us. You stole our future, our security, our family legacy. Jack had risen to his feet, looking confused and alarmed. Dad, what is this? Who are these people? Your half-siblings, Jack, I answered before our father could speak. The family Dad abandoned and stole from before he married Mom. Audrey had gone pale. This is insane. Dad, tell them this isn't true. My father straightened his shoulders, his expression hardening. What's true is that I made difficult business decisions to protect this family, our family. He gestured to Jack and Audrey. Everything I did was legal, regardless of what these people claim. Legal? Troy laughed bitterly, pulling documents from his briefcase. Is that what you call forging signatures on trust transfers? Or creating fake investment firms to funnel money offshore? Or falsifying tax returns for 3 decades? These documents prove nothing, my father dismissed, though I could see the first flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. They could be fabricated, manipulated. The FBI doesn't think so, I countered. They're very interested in Mom's evidence. And the judge who just froze all your accounts and stopped the Riverside property proceeds from being transferred? She seemed convinced, too. That landed like a physical blow. My father actually staggered slightly, gripping the edge of his desk for support. You froze my accounts? You had no right. We had every right, Madison said firmly. That money belongs to our families, both families. Money you stole through fraud and deception. Jack looked between our father and the newcomers, confusion giving way to dawning comprehension. The Riverside sale. That's why you've been so anxious to complete it this week. You were planning to take the money and run, weren't you? My father turned on him with a snarl. Don't be ridiculous. I was simply finalizing a business transaction. A transaction involving property you didn't legally own, Sarah pointed out. Property that was supposed to be held in trust for my children. I owned it, my father shouted, his composure finally cracking. I earned it. I was the one who managed those assets for 30 years, who turned worthless land into valuable properties. You stole it, I corrected, from Sarah's family and from Mom's. You manipulated and threatened both women to gain control of their family wealth. And now, it's time to give it back. My father's expression changed, a calculating look replacing his anger. He straightened his tie and adopted a more reasonable tone. King, I understand you're upset about your mother's death. Grief can cloud judgment. But this vendetta will destroy everything, including any inheritance you might have received. I don't want your stolen money, I told him. I want justice. For Sarah's family and for Mom. Justice, he repeated with a hollow laugh. And what about loyalty? Family loyalty? Jack? Audrey? Are you going to stand by while your brother destroys everything I built for you? Jack looked uncomfortable, avoiding our father's gaze. Dad, if what they're saying is true, if there's actual evidence, evidence can be interpreted many ways. My father cut in smoothly. With the right attorneys, this could all be explained as legitimate business transactions. Stop it, Audrey suddenly said, her voice quiet but firm. All eyes turned to her in surprise. Just stop lying, Dad. For once in your life, tell the truth. Audrey, my father's voice held a warning. You don't understand what's at stake here. I understand perfectly, she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. I've always known something wasn't right. The locked room, the secret phone calls, the way you treated Mom. I just didn't want to see it. She turned to Sarah and her children. I'm sorry. I didn't know the full extent of what he did to you. I should have asked more questions when I learned about you 3 years ago. You knew for 3 years? I asked, hurt and betrayal washing over me again. Audrey nodded, looking ashamed. Dad told me when I questioned some discrepancies in the family accounts. He admitted he had another family before us, but said they had tried to take advantage of him, that he had to protect himself financially. I believed him because I wanted to, because it was easier than facing the truth. My father was watching Audrey with cold fury. So you're turning against me too? After everything I've given you? You never gave us anything that wasn't stolen from someone else, Audrey replied, a new strength in her voice. And I'm done pretending otherwise. My father's face hardened as he realized he was losing control of the situation. With surprising speed, he lunged for his desk drawer, yanking it open. Dad, don't! Jack shouted, moving to intercept him. But my father had already pulled out a stack of documents, holding them over the small decorative fireplace that was currently lit in the study. Back off, all of you, he threatened. These are the original deeds to several properties, including ones your precious Patricia didn't know about. If they burn, proving ownership becomes much more complicated. It won't matter, Troy said calmly. We have copies of most documents, and the electronic trail is clear. Destroying evidence now will only add obstruction of justice to your charges. You think you've won, my father sneered. But you have no idea who you're dealing with. I have friends in places you can't imagine. Connections you'll never touch. By this time tomorrow, I'll be gone, and you'll all be left with nothing but paperwork and regrets. He moved to drop the documents into the fire, but Audrey stepped forward, blocking his path. Move, Audrey, he ordered. No, she said simply, standing her ground. This ends now. Get out of my way, he shouted, trying to push past her. What happened next occurred so quickly it was hard to follow. My father shoved Audrey roughly, causing her to stumble. Jack moved to catch her, and in that moment of distraction, my father made a dash for the door. But Troy was faster, intercepting him before he could escape. They grappled briefly, the documents scattering across the floor. When the chaos subsided, my father was restrained by Troy and Jack, the fight gone out of him as he realized he was trapped. It's over, Thomas, Sarah said quietly. After 30 years, it's finally over. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Madison went to answer it, returning moments later with 2 men in suits who identified themselves as FBI agents. Thomas Davidson? One of them asked, though it was clear he already knew the answer. We have a warrant for your arrest on multiple counts of wire fraud, mail fraud, tax evasion, and embezzlement. My father's face went slack as the reality of his situation finally hit him. As the agents handcuffed him and read him his rights, he looked at each of us in turn, his expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. This isn't over, he said as they led him toward the door. You'll regret this, all of you. But his threats sounded hollow now, the desperate posturing of a man who had finally lost control of the narrative he'd constructed over decades. When the front door closed behind them, a profound silence fell over the room. 30 years of lies, manipulation, and stolen futures had culminated in this moment. Justice had finally arrived, but it felt more somber than triumphant. Jack was the first to break the silence. I had no idea, he said, looking at Sarah and her children with genuine remorse. I swear, I didn't know the full extent of what he did to you. Neither did I, Audrey added, tears streaming down her face. Not really. I knew there was another family, but the way Dad explained it. I'm so sorry. Madison approached them cautiously. We don't blame you for what your father did. We've had 30 years to understand that Thomas was the one responsible, not his children. But we were complicit, Audrey admitted. We chose to believe his lies because it was easier than facing the truth. And we abandoned Mom when she needed us most. I put my arm around my sister, feeling the walls between us begin to crumble. Mom understood, I told her. In her letter, she said we all deserved better, including you and Jack. She knew Dad had manipulated all of us in different ways. Sarah had been quietly observing the scene, and now she stepped forward, her expression solemn but compassionate. Patricia and I spoke more often in recent years. She worried about all her children, the ones she raised and the ones she wished she could have known better. She wanted healing for everyone. When the truth finally came out, as we stood in that room, 2 families shattered and reformed by one man's greed, I felt something unexpected begin to take root. The possibility of a new kind of family, one built on truth and redemption rather than lies and manipulation. What happens now? Jack asked, looking around at the scattered documents and the empty space where our father had stood moments before. Now, Troy said with quiet certainty, we begin to rebuild what Thomas tried to destroy, together. 1 year later, we gathered at Oakwood Cemetery on a crisp autumn morning. The 5 of us, me, Audrey, Jack, Madison, and Troy, stood in a semicircle around our mother's grave, now adorned with fresh flowers and a newly installed headstone. She would have loved this, Audrey said softly, adjusting the bouquet of white lilies. All of us together. The past year had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, emotional reckonings, and gradual healing. My father had eventually pleaded guilty to multiple federal charges of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion. He was currently serving a 15-year sentence, having lost everything: his freedom, his reputation, and the family he had manipulated for so long. The court had frozen and eventually recovered most of the stolen assets, including the proceeds from the Riverside property sale. A judge had ordered the establishment of a new trust to manage and fairly distribute the recovered funds among all 5 children and Sarah. It wasn't the full amount that had been stolen over 3 decades, but it was enough to provide financial security for everyone. Sarah joined us at the cemetery, carrying a small tree sapling in a pot. "Are we ready?" she asked, looking around at all of us. We nodded, moving to a spot near my mother's grave where the cemetery management had granted us permission to plant a memorial tree. Jack and Troy began digging, working together with an easy camaraderie that had developed surprisingly quickly between them. "I keep thinking about what Mom would say if she could see us now," I mused, watching my brothers work. "She knew this would happen," Madison said confidently. "That's why she left the letter, why she collected all that evidence. She believed in the possibility of healing, even if she wouldn't be here to see it." The past year had brought us all closer in ways none of us could have anticipated. Audrey and Madison had discovered a shared interest in photography and were now running workshops together for underprivileged youth. Jack and Troy, despite their initial wariness, had formed a strong bond through their joint efforts to untangle the financial mess our father had created. And Sarah had become a maternal figure for all of us, filling a void left by my mother's passing. Her strength and forgiveness had set the tone for our collective healing. The hole was ready, and we carefully placed the young oak tree into its new home. Each of us took turns adding soil around the roots, a symbolic gesture of our shared commitment to nurturing this new family connection. "I spoke with the warden yesterday," Jack mentioned as we finished planting. "Dad's still refusing visitors." "Has he shown any remorse?" Troy asked, though we all knew the answer. Jack shook his head. "According to his therapist, he still believes he was justified in everything he did. That he was just being a good businessman. Some people never change," Sarah said with a sigh. "But we have. That's what matters." After the tree planting, we gathered at Sarah's home for lunch. What had once been an unthinkable scenario, the two families brought together at the same table, had become a monthly tradition. The conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter and occasional good-natured teasing. "I found more photos in Mom's things," Audrey announced, bringing out a small album. "From before we were born. I thought you might like to see them." Madison, Troy. "Some people never change," Sarah said with a sigh. "But we have. That's what matters." "He wasn't always a monster," Sarah acknowledged, looking at the photos with a complex mixture of emotions. "There was a time when he was capable of love, or something like it, before ambition consumed him." "Do you think people are born with that capacity for deception?" I asked. "Or do they develop it over time?" "I think everyone has the potential for both good and evil," Sarah replied thoughtfully. "The choices we make, day after day, year after year, eventually shape who we become. Your father chose greed and deception so many times that eventually it became who he was, which is why what we're doing now matters so much," Madison added. "Every time we choose honesty and reconciliation over bitterness, we're shaping who we'll become." Later that evening, as the gathering wound down, I found myself sitting on Sarah's porch with Troy. The autumn sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Sometimes I still can't believe how everything turned out," Troy admitted. "A year ago, I was so full of anger toward your father, toward his real family. I never imagined we could be sitting here like this." "Me neither," I agreed. "I thought I knew what family meant, but I had no idea." "Family isn't just about blood or legal ties," Troy reflected. "It's about who shows up, who stays when things get hard." I thought about my mother, alone in that hospital room except for me. How she had used her final act to bring healing to 2 broken families. How she had shown up for Sarah's children in small ways over the years, even when she couldn't do so openly. "Mom always knew that," I said. "Even when she was trapped in an impossible situation, she never forgot what really mattered." "Her final letter was the ultimate act of showing up," Troy agreed. "She risked everything, her reputation, how she'd be remembered, even potentially your relationship with her to finally tell the truth." Inside the house, I could hear Audrey and Madison laughing about something, their voices blending in perfect harmony. Jack was helping Sarah with the dishes, their conversation a low, comfortable murmur. "What do you think happens now?" Troy asked. "For all of us?" I considered his question, watching the last rays of sunlight disappear behind the horizon. I think we keep building this new family, one day at a time. We honor Mom's courage by living truthfully. We prove that the cycle of deception can be broken. And we remember that sometimes, the greatest gifts come from the most painful situations, Troy added. Without your father's betrayal, without your mother's suffering, none of us would be here together. The porch light came on automatically as darkness fell, casting a warm glow over us. Inside, Audrey called out that dessert was ready. "I'm glad you're my brother, King," Troy said as we stood to go back inside. "Despite everything, I'm grateful that we found each other." "Me too," I replied, feeling the truth of it deep in my bones. Family isn't what I thought it was a year ago. It's better. It's real. In that moment, I felt my mother's presence, as tangible as the cool evening air. I knew she was witnessing this healing, this reconciliation she had set in motion with her final act of courage. The porch light came on automatically as darkness fell, casting a warm glow over us. Inside, Audrey called out that dessert was ready. As we rejoined the others for dessert, gathered around Sarah's dining table, I thought about how truth, however painful, is always the foundation for genuine love and connection. My father had built his life on deception, and in the end, he lost everything. My mother had sacrificed nearly everything to protect her children, but in her final act of truth-telling, she had given us the greatest gift of all, each other. To Patricia, Sarah proposed, raising her glass in a toast, who found the courage to right a terrible wrong, even when she wouldn't be here to see the results. To Mom, the rest of us echoed, our glasses meeting with a gentle chime. Outside, the young oak tree we had planted stood in the cemetery, its roots taking hold in the soil near my mother's grave. Like our newly formed family, it was just beginning its journey, fragile yet full of promise, nourished by truth and ready to grow stronger with each passing season. I know now that family isn't defined by perfect circumstances or unblemished histories. True family is forged in the crucible of adversity, strengthened by forgiveness, and sustained by the choice to love despite past wounds. My mother understood this, even when she couldn't act on it, and in her final gift to us, she ensured that we would understand it too. Have you ever discovered a family secret that changed everything you thought you knew? Or experienced how truth, however painful, can ultimately lead to healing? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story touched you in any way, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible even after decades of pain. Thank you for listening, and may you find the courage to embrace truth in your own family journey.